What was your first thought when that happened?
No big deal.
Seriously?
Yeah, the term I used that night on CBS News with Katie Couric was, this is control chaos. It was said in the movie Sully, what the mission really was. It was no one dies today. In a matter of a minute and a half to 2 minutes, he went through that process of decision making. We're doing this because you have to keep your head while all this is breaking loose. You got 151 other people in the back, right, that you're responsible for. And you got to make a call, life or death call right now.
On this week's episode of The Engaging Marketeer, I am interviewing Dave Sanderson, who was a passenger on flight 1549, which you may know was the plane that went down in the Hudson in New York and was the subject of the film Sully, starring Tom Hanks. Dave was one of the passengers who helped other passengers escape from the plane out onto the wing, and he was the last passenger off the plane, followed only by the captain, obviously Sully, Tom Hanks. So I'm going to be interviewing Dave on that experience, what it was like, what he felt when he heard the first boom and saw that the engine went out, and how it's transformed his life from then to now. I think there's really only one place we can start, isn't there? You've been involved in one of the most shocking and talked about incidents that happened in probably the last 100 years in America. Can you tell me what that day started like?
Most definitely. Thank you very much for the question. I was very honored to be able to be a part of something like this. It was a normal business day. We were working in a distribution center in New York City, and primarily Brooklyn in New York City. And distribution centers, if you haven't worked in one, they open up early because they're usually either 18 or 24-hour operations because they're always going distribution. So we went in at 5 o'clock that morning after being 2 days on the road in Sarasota, Florida, and Petersburg, Virginia. So we wanted to get going when all the trucks and all the distribution activities were going, so we were working on systems, how to be more optimizing their systems. So they got done about 10 because at 10 o'clock all the trucks are out. So we're done at 10. So it's like, okay, great, I get to go home early today. It's and you're on the road, you can't wait to get home. And it's like I had a 5 o'clock flight scheduled because of you never know how the day's going to play out on business. So you have to. I always plan for the last flight out, just in case something went crazy during the day. Yeah. So I called a travel agent, work with her. She put me on U.S. Airways Flight 1549. I was not supposed to be on that flight.
Oh, wow. Wow. So it's kind of luck and chance and happenstance that allowed you to be on that flight in the first place.
It all came together in a way that I think I was supposed to be on that plane. In my perspective, I was supposed to be on that plane.
So you feel like it was a calling that you were meant to be there?
I do. Personally, I do. After looking back and processing this over the last number of years, I think pretty much everybody, including the captain and first officer, we had the right crew in place. It's very rare that somebody who could pull off what the captain pulled off to get it down. Not many captains could do that. And you saw the movie Sully. That was accurate. Not too many other captains or first officers could have done it. So I think he was on that plane for a reason. Likewise. So I think people were even, in my perspective, everybody was stationed on the plane for a reason, the way they were stationed. And it's like they talk about in business, having being in the right seat on the bus, make sure your people on the right seat on the bus. I think that's what happened on that plane. I think the right people are in the right place on that plane to make sure that once he got it down, which he gets all the credit for, then it came a whole team effort at that point in time. And I think the right people were stationed where they were supposed to be stationed.
So speaking of station, where on the plane were you actually sat?
I was in seat 15A. That's 4 rows behind the left wing. So
you had a good view of what happened then.
I saw everything on the left side of the plane. So I was witnessing the strike, the fire, the whole thing from my perspective. Because I was 4 rows, I could see perfectly out the window. So.
And what was your first thought when that happened?
No big deal.
Seriously?
I fly over 100 times a year, and I know planes, especially international planes, usually must have 3 engines. Domestic planes in the United States have to have two engines if they carry so many passengers. That's what I learned. So I knew we had another engine. So we were just going to go back to the airport, and I'm not going to get home early. But that's where no one knew at that point. I tell people, I think that's where God's grace started on this plane, because no one knew that what happened where we were on the left side, I'll show up on the right side of the plane simultaneously at the same time. Because we only heard one explosion on the plane. We heard boom. We didn't hear boom, boom. And I think if we heard a boom, boom, people are now, and you're in New York City on a plane, I think there's a whole different reaction going on. Whole different reaction going on.
So presumably there were people on the right side of the plane that saw something happen there and thought, that's okay, there's an engine on the left side.
Yeah, exactly. And when I talk to my business organization, when I do break this down, because I think there's a real great business case for mindset and execution. There's a lot of things I talk about. But one of the things that I learned from a captain, and I was in Orlando, and I get the opportunity to be with captains and talk to them because of what happened. So they want to talk to me, I want to talk to them. So, and one of them pointed out a very unique point that I never thought about, but I think it's true. He said look around. We were in Orlando, Florida. I don't know if you've ever been to Orlando.
I have, yeah. And
the airport, and Disney was there, and there's a lot of theme parks, and most of the people that fly in are not there for business, like me. When I fly to Orlando, I'm on business, right? Mm. Most people are there for enjoyment purposes or doing whatever they do. He said, look around. How many business people do you see coming on this plane? Maybe 4 or 5, maybe, right? He said, how many business people were on your plane? 80, 90% minimum. Mm. That's the difference. You got people on the plane who are business people, probably in business mode, right? Who have to make decisions about their business. So when something like this happens, like me, I went to business mode. I'm like, okay, what's my game plan, right? How am I going to execute? So I think that had a lot. The makeup of the plane, I think, had a lot to do with the rescue, how the rescue played out. I think it had a tremendous amount, because you look at variables. If this happens in Orlando, let's say he takes off in Orlando, and this happens, same thing happens, bird strike, right? Both engines are out, he's going down. And you have 90% of the people, roughly, who are usually not high passenger velocity or frequent flyers like me. They probably lose it. They probably are, and you see the movie Flight, with, I don't know if you saw that movie, but that's how that flight was coming to Orlando. A similar situation happened in the movie, and everybody freaked out.
Which one's Flight? Is that the one with Denzel, or is that the one with
Denzel? That's the one with Denzel. He was drinking on the plane, right?
And he inverts the plane, doesn't he, to put out a fire?
That's right. Yeah. So, I think that had a lot to do with the outcome of that day. There's two distinct situations: getting it down. Because if he doesn't get it down, everything else doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, right? You're all dead anyway. But he gets it down. Now you have a plane sinking in 36-degree Fahrenheit water, right? And you got to get everybody out, and you don't know if there's a fire. You don't know. I mean, all these are variables, right? You don't know. But the passengers went into business mode, and I tell people, the term I used that night on CBS News with Katie Couric was, this is control chaos. And what I meant by saying that was, it was very fast moving. I mean, you're moving, man. You're not waiting around for someone to tell you what to do, but it was orderly. No one was pushing people. No one was, get out of the way, right? Everybody was orderly. So I think people went into that mindset, okay, I got to execute now, just like I did.
So everybody came together and all had essentially the same plan. We're going to do this. We're going to do it together, and everybody's going to survive together. So
did you see the movie Sully?
I have seen the movie. Yes.
So it was actually said in the movie what the unvocalized mission was, because no one sat around and had, okay, this is our mission plan. This is how we're going to execute. You don't have time for that, right? I mean, this thing's going down. But it was said in the movie Sully what the mission really was. It was no one dies today. And that was the mission. So I think everybody came together with the mindset, we got to execute. And leaders were where leaders were supposed to be. People who were not leaders executed based on, direction, didn't take anything personal, right? because you got to execute. You have a minimal amount of time to get out of a plane because the back of the plane is already submerged underwater. Already. Because when I went to the back of the plane, it was chest deep. It was already submerged. So if you look at it from a business perspective, which I love doing this because I can break it down in different. I love doing business cases. Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. There's two distinct parts of this situation.
And what were the two distinct parts?
Getting it down, getting it out. Two different things that had to happen, right? In sequence, right? If you got to get it down, now you have the shot to get out, but you have to execute. You have to execute. And part of the execution, likewise, which I talk about when I do my business talks, is how the right side of the plane, where I went out, the right side of the plane, I went out 10F. I never got out on the wing. I was always inside the plane until I swam because I had to hold on to the lifeboat. And the reason why I was distinct from the left side of the plane is this. The crew, the flight attendants have certain designated areas they're supposed to go to. And the flight attendant, who was a lady, who was supposed to be on the right side of the plane, got injured. She got a piece of metal basically came up through her leg at the back of the plane when on the crash. So she was incapacitated. That's why they say in that little brochure, read the brochure. Because if the flight attendant can't handle it, somebody else has to handle it. And that's what happened. So they got her out, the left side of the plane. So the right side of the plane had to be totally managed by passengers who had zero training in the middle of a crisis and had to manage it, right? The left side of the plane had a totally different situation. They had all the crew. So they had leadership, crew leadership. But the issue they had was this, is the left side of the plane was facing towards Manhattan. The right side of the plane was facing towards New Jersey. You look at how this whole thing played out. And part of the rescue were helicopters that came in with Aquamen. And what Aquamen do basically is they jump out of the helicopters and swim under the plane to make sure is anybody stuck, right? Is anybody can find it? So they were jumping in on the left side to start going around the swimming, right? To see what's going on. Well, when the helicopters came in, they were knocking people off the wing on the left side of the plane because of the rotors, right? So those people were in and out of water constantly, right? On the out, in and out, right? Well, the right side of the plane, we didn't have to deal with that, but we had to deal with, we got to figure this thing out, right? And I managed the door. That's what I did. That was my leadership moment. I had to basically handle the door, and I had to handle the lifeboat because the lifeboat kept floating out into the river because of the currents. So I held on to the lifeboat. There's a picture on Good Morning America that this is how I found this out. I didn't know really what happened until I was there and getting interviewed. And then someone took a picture of me holding the lifeboat inside the plane with water up my back. So I knew that's how I became the last passenger out. That's how I knew I was the last passenger out. So I had to hold on to this. So I was having to deal with that. Other people had to deal with getting people moving up and down the wing. I mean, there was a lot of things that had to happen, but we had to deal with it ourselves. We had no one to give us direction. So leaders step up in times of crisis.
They certainly do. Certainly do. I've been on one of the, I think they're ferries that do the tours from up and down the Hudson and around the whole island. And when I was on one of those ferries, I think it was 2 years ago, in the commentary they were giving, they talked about that plane going down and how they were one of the first ferries to react and the boats were there. So how quick was that you actually were down and opening the door, that those boats turned up to pick people up?
The first New York waterway, there's a New York waterway, boat was there within 2 minutes.
Wow.
And you look at that from a business perspective. So they start their ferries, and let me be specific. They're always running, but they have the business ferries go back and forth, right? Taking people back and forth into the business. Well, their ferries were set up to run starting about 3:00 for those rush hour going back and forth from New York to New Jersey. This happened at 3:27 p.m. So the ferries were already queued up. So the gentleman who was in charge of the ferries, I met him. His name was Arthur Imperator. He was the CEO of the ferry. He's no longer with us. He passed away. But I got to speak with him a number of times. He's the one that made the call to put the ferries out to the plane, because they were set up to run shuttle. Instead of running a shuttle, they came out to the plane. So that had to execute perfectly, and he'd have someone had to make that call to send the ferries out. All this things are happening so quickly, but that's why one of the things I talk about in leadership, and one of the most important things, is you got to be able to make a decision and go with it. A lot of people don't want to make a decision because they think they're going to make the wrong decision, right? So they don't want to be. A leader's got to make the decision and go with it, whether it's right or wrong. They got to go with it, and so all these decisions were being made independently, right? The only decision I heard really was made in unison was with the New Jersey and New York state police and emergency people, because this was revealed in public for the first time back on January 15th of this year. I held on January 15th, it was the 15th anniversary. And so I did an event in New York City, bringing the first responders from New York and New Jersey together for the first time. And we were as a thank you event. We were just thanking them for what their service was. So I had everyone come up. Everyone told their story, right, in sequence. So you can see how this whole thing came. It was really cool. Yeah. The gentleman from New Jersey who was in charge of EMT, which is emergency management, it's the medical, okay, shared this for the first time in public, that the plan to be able to execute that part of it was only approved a week before. He signed off on it. The gentleman from New York signed off a week before. So that plan on how they were going to do, because at 9/11 they didn't have that. They were just going. Everybody was serving in different ways, right? But they finally had a unified plan between New York and New Jersey on how they were going to respond to an incident. And the incident wasn't a plane; it was a boat tragedy, right? If one of those ferries go down, that was the sort of scenario they played with, and that's what this plan was based on. Is if a ferry gets incapacitated and goes down in the Hudson, and it could be on the New York or New Jersey side, this is how we're going to do it. All they did is substitute a plane for a boat, and they executed.
Yeah, they couldn't have imagined that it would be a plane, could they? They could never have imagined that.
No. So, that's the one thing that I know that the only units that actually came together and said, okay, time to go. And who was on the lead, right? Because you have to have someone to lead the issue. I don't know if New Jersey or New York led it. I haven't found that one out yet. But yeah, this is so when you're hearing the business side of this whole thing, right? This is like all these little things, right? That had to come together, and that's why I got called a miracle. Because how many times in life do all these different disparate things come together, and you have an outcome like this? Doesn't happen too often.
Well, you mentioned having to make leadership decisions and make them, and then obviously back them and stick with them and have the confidence to see them through. But it's not just that as well, because there were so many people on that plane. Someone like yourself is making the leadership decision that this is what I'm going to do with the door. I'm going to hold the life raft like this. Other people have to have confidence in you and follow it, and not try to make decisions themselves and count against you. How did that happen? How did you make sure there weren't people essentially going off with their own ideas of how to do something, and they all followed your lead?
Well, I don't think I was the only leader. And one of the things you realize when you're going through a situation like this, which was a great learning experience for me likewise, is that I'm good at some things. I'm not good at some other things. So you got to sometimes check your ego at the door and say, you know what? Let that person lead that. I'll manage this. I'll lead this section. And that's what really happened. We had some people helping people down, in the lifeboat, right? There was a lady there who was leading that effort to get people off the lifeboat. I couldn't do that, right? I wasn't situated was in place to do that. So she did that, right? There's another gentleman on the other side of the plane was helping people out the front of the plane. He was never a former Marine. He's a retired Marine who was doing that. He sat in first class. So I think there are people like that doing different things, right? And when they were yelling at me to hold the boat, hold the lifeboat, right? It's because I had leverage, and that's why then all of a sudden they looked at me to be able to, okay, I'll manage this, right? And so the situation that I had was there was a lady on the wing that wasn't moving, and I noticed it, and that's when I yelled at her, because one of the things I learned in my training through my life is when you have somebody that's startled or shocked, they're incapacitated because they're shocked. What do I do? And she wasn't doing anything. And in a situation like this, you got to move. There's no time to stand around and say, okay, what do I do next? You got to move, take action. And she wasn't. And she was standing in the middle of the wing. Now, people are trying to get her around and get to the lifeboats, right? And she's not moving, so they're not moving around her. So all I did was yell at her and got her attention. The lady, that's how I found out the lady on the boat. She's the one who took action and grabbed her arm and pulled her on the lifeboat so other people could start walking down the way. So it was a matter of teamwork without even coming together as a team. I was like, okay, you do this. Okay, now she took action, right? Things had to happen. And there was a sequence to everything likewise. Just like I said, the sequence of the captain doesn't get the plane down, none of this really matters. I'm at the bottom of the Hudson River and you're not talking to me today. So, yeah. A lot of this came down to leadership, and leadership based on the mission of No One Dies Today. And I think that was the unspoken mission of the day. And Clint Eastwood got it just right in the movie. Got it just right.
And what many people don't realize is when things happen like this, and it wasn't covered in the film, is what was it like for you and presumably the other passengers as well, later that day, when all of this had settled and you've had this huge adrenaline rush, you've had this huge shock in your life, a moment where you could have died. How did your evening go?
Well, I was one of the 2 people that stayed the night in the hospital. 148 other passengers went home. There are 21 people that went to the hospital, 18 to New York City, 3 to New Jersey hospitals. 2 of us, Barry and I, stayed the night. So I was in the hospital. I had hypothermia. So it took them 5 hours for me to basically get back to my temperature up. Barry had fractured his sternum based on impact. So he fractured his sternum. So we were the only 2 people in the hospital. And so what happened was everybody's going home, whether they're back to New York or Connecticut or Charlotte, wherever they're going, right? The people were going different places. So the authorities could find us. So we were being interviewed by authorities all night. The media could find us. That's why we were doing media all night. I was doing CBS and Barry was doing ABC right next to each other. And we were laying in the beds next to each other, CBS, ABC, doing interviews. So all night long we were getting interviewed, right? So media, authorities, right? And finally they moved me to a private room because of my situation, which wasn't private because everybody was coming in, right? So there was no sleep or no rest. And I think I ate something probably after midnight. I don't even know. But yeah, it took them 5 hours. So I didn't really was even able to be moved out of the emergency room until probably 11 o'clock that night. Yeah, and then they moved me to a private room and then everybody starts coming in, right, to interview you and talk to you.
So when were you able to actually get some time on your own and take stock of what happened?
That wasn't for a while because I flew back the next day, which was a whole nother.
So you're straight on a plane again the next day.
They put me on another flight home, and there's a whole story I tell about that. But when I got home, then all the local people wanted to interview me, right? And my company wanted me to go back to work that next week to go to Michigan.
Seriously,
I'll say my company, my manager. To be very specific, my manager asked me to. Not the company. The company would have given me some time, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, my company didn't call my wife or I, so I didn't know. So until I found out my manager wanted me to go to Michigan, so I didn't really have any downtime. I was go, and now I'm trying to put my life back together. I've lost all my business equipment, so now I've got to recreate that and get that handled. Well, I got to go to Michigan to serve my client. Oh, I've got a family over here that's in shock. Oh, I got media over here, right? Oh, now I'm going to go to LA to see Ellen and Bonnie Hunt and Dr. Phil, right? So, and, I've got to sort of figure out what happened. And there was a time, I'll probably say about 3 or 4 weeks later when it all just hit me. It just hit me, right? And fortunately for me, I was the head of security at that point in time for a guy by the name of Tony Robbins. So Tony's taught me about the mindset, right? About how to manage your mind, right? So I had a good basis for that.
Right.
But there's still a time when things hit you, right? And you got to process it. But fortunately for me, I got it out of my body so quickly that I didn't have any of the depression like some other people on the plane did, because they just kept it in. Some people didn't want to talk about it. I get it, right? I get it. Some people didn't want to, they retired from their work, so they didn't have an outlet there. So a lot of people went through a depression. Some people still haven't got back on a plane yet.
Seriously?
I get it, right?
Wow.
And that's why I did my TED Talk, Darren, is that's called about bouncing back, about post-traumatic growth. How do you grow out of a traumatic life experience, right? Or so many people go the other way, which if you saw the movie Sully, he was struggling, right? Because he was getting attacked when he thought he did something, the right thing, which he did do the right thing, and he still get attacked. Because what does it always come down to? Money.
Well, that's a question I was going to come on to, actually, because obviously in the film, the pilot who saved everybody's lives was accused of essentially not doing the right thing. They said he should have turned that plane around and gone back to the airport to do a proper landing and save the plane, and he'd costed them billions of dollars in an aircraft, or millions of dollars, not billions, millions in an aircraft. Did you know at the time that he was being accused of doing the wrong thing?
We knew that, so let me give you a framing. I think other passengers were, because I talked to them. I was interviewed by the NTSB, the same people who were doing this. And they actually flew me to Los Angeles to have an interview. So I'm interviewed, and, I was asked all these questions, right? And so all this. So we knew something was going on, right? Didn't know the magnitude of what was going on. But we were all, at least I was, I know other people were, I don't know all, but some of us were invited to that session when he was doing that, doing the movie. You see it. 4 passengers went. That's my understanding. I did not go. But I talked to one of them that went, and they said that, it wasn't as accusatory as it came across in the movie, but it was, let's get to the facts. And because it came down to what we just talked about, money. Who's going to pay for that plane? Who's going to pay for the plane? Because you said it correctly. It cost them millions of dollars, not only in physical attributes, but that plane runs 24/7, right? Potential revenue.
Yeah.
So, and fortunately, he's a very intelligent man. Not only could he execute like nobody's business, but he's very intelligent, and fortunately, he was able to knock it down pretty quick. But yeah, he had 4 options, which I think he detailed, and we knew he had 4 options because I've talked to him many times. I've shared the stage with him, and he chose the best option. You know what the 4 options were he had?
No, I don't. Let's talk it through.
So in a matter of 2 minutes, right? Because this is going quick. He had to make a call. He had to make a call. First call was the ocean was right there. All right. He could have put it in the ocean. No one there to rescue him. Rough water, right? Second option was Teterboro Airport, because it was right there. He could see if he could dive in, but tall buildings. If he's going down too quick, he could have clipped one of those buildings, like you saw in the opening scene in his dreams. Yeah, those buildings. All right.
Yeah, where everybody died.
And that could have been bigger than 9/11, right? So that's not an option. Third option was get it back to the airport. And he may have been able to make it, but it was proven, right? He couldn't get back there. Fourth option, runway. He saw basically a runway. He visualized the runway with the water. If I could just get it down, right? That's the best option. So he, in a matter of 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, he went through that process of decision making. We're doing this, and he heard it in the movie. We're going to the Hudson, right? I think that's amazing mindset, because you have to keep your head while all this is breaking loose. You got 151 other people in the back, right, that you're responsible for, and you got to make a call, life or death call right now, and you got to then execute on that call. And even if you execute, you don't know if you're going to pull it off, right? So I give him all the credit getting that thing down, man. The decision making, the execution, all goes to him.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't even flying the plane, as you know, if you saw the movie, he wasn't flying the plane. The first officer was flying the plane. Then he said, "My plane." He had to make a call, and he had enough confidence in himself to make a call. He didn't know if the other guy did, right?
And then, of course, the last thing he was thinking of, if I manage to get this plane down and save all of these people and not take down a building in the process and kill countless thousands of people, that someone's going to be second-guessing this call for months and years afterwards.
Well, the closest
what happened
he came
to the plane?
was taking out the George Washington Bridge. He only cleared the bridge by 400 feet.
Wow.
So he could have taken out the George Washington Bridge during rush hour in New York City. And if you talk to New York police and New Jersey police, because I have a very close connection with them, and I didn't know this until I was told, on average during rush hour now, whatever that time frame is, 2, 4, whatever that is, New York City, there's an average of 800 cars on that bridge at any one time. So if he goes down 400 feet, instead of gliding it up, he goes down, he takes out the bridge with potentially 800 cars on a bridge and a plane. Bigger. I mean, it's huge. So all these things, right? No one thinks about all. And I dissect these things when I speak to people, because I want people to understand. This just wasn't just, hey, he got it down, everybody survived, hey, go team, right? No. Everything had to come together in sequence, right? There's a sequence to it.
Yeah. And so you shared a stage with the captain, with Sully, afterwards. What's he like when he's telling this story on a stage?
He goes into captain mode. When we spoke at Southern Illinois University together, and I thought I was going to go first because I was giving the passenger talk. He was giving the cockpit talk, right? But he went first. So I was in the back sort of getting ready, and I was listening and checking in. And I felt what I visualized, he was in captain mode. Business, right? This is how I made the decisions. This is how we went through, right? Boom, 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 boom. He stated, I mean, it was a beautiful talk on how his mindset worked. I came from a different perspective. I came from this. I'm in the back of the plane just like everybody in this audience would be in the back of the plane. Let me tell you what goes on, right? So it was a totally different talk. That's why I tell people, you talk to all the passengers and crew, you get 155 different talks. Everybody had a different perspective, right? But yeah, he and I shared the stage there, and I was very honored to do that. And we spent a few minutes later that night, because I just written my book, Moments Matter, and I want to give him a copy because I have him in the book, of course. I gave him a copy of the book, and so we had a little time to have that one-on-one, which was the first time we really spent some time. Because I've seen him in all these different events, right? But you don't get to talk to him, right? But I had that opportunity in Southern Illinois University, and it was interesting because he was the last person out. I was the last passenger out. So you have it right there in front of your head. The two last people off the plane from totally different worlds, right?
You mentioned you were security for Tony Robbins earlier.
Yes.
Obviously, Tony is one of the most charismatic business speakers that's ever lived, and he knows how to command an arena, a stadium. What have you learned from Tony as opposed for what you do now in actually telling this story from stage and captivating people?
Oh, thank you. Because I was very honored to be head of security for Tony for over 10 years. So I was very close with him. He mentored me. I tell people he gave me a doctorate, now on mindset, right? Because I was, one of the biggest things he talks about, and I share likewise. I didn't come up with this. But proximity is power. If you get in proximity to somebody who has a unique mindset, glean as much as you can. And I was very, very often, so I was up close. I could see how did he do his thing. But I'm not a speaker. But we were in Chicago, and he basically told me he's going to get another head of security because he wanted me to do it. He said, it's time for you to do this. Go, right? Kick me out of the nest, right? Burn the boats, right? Do it. And he was he inspired me, and he's the one who basically pushed me and said, you know what? You can do this, right? Stop working for this company. Do this, right? And when somebody like that tells you with authority and and you respect, you got to have rapport, right? If you're going to get somebody's grill, you better have some rapport. And he's a master of how to build rapport, master. Mm. So I picked a lot of these things up from him, and some of the mannerisms I do on stage, some of the things that I do, because he incorporates, audio, visual. I mean, I do the whole thing like that too, not to that level, but I was very blessed to be around him for over actually 15 years, but 10 years ahead of security. So I got to see it up close on how do you engage and connect with an audience through stories, right? Through story. Mm. And I was very blessed that he took enough interest in me and showed me how to do that.
So the kind of access you had to Tony then is the sort of access that, well, you can't buy, can you? Because Tony, if you want coaching from Tony, he's very expensive. If you want that kind of one-on-one and coaching, I'm not even sure he even does that anymore.
I think he does 4 people a year. I think he at least the last time I spoke to him a few years ago, he was still doing 4 people a year. Mm. And yeah, it cost millions of dollars, right?
Exactly, yeah. So you were paid to have that level of coaching from him.
Yeah, I had the opportunity, to be in proximity and serve his outcome, because I was there for his outcome, not my outcome. Hmm. But I was taking copious notes. I mean, back here in my credenza, I've got all these notes, right, that I took, right? And I had my notes on what I learned in these little things. So I try to tell people, I mean, my second book, From Turmoil and Triumph, is really about why it's so essential to have a mentor, somebody who not only can challenge you, but has these insights that you don't have. Hmm. And my first mentor came in my life in 1983. He passed away in 1997. And then Tony picked me up as assistant head of security and then head of security. So I've always had a mentor. And I didn't even, I didn't even know what a mentor was until 1983. Hmm. But I am so passionate about making sure people, that's how I end my talks, is everybody, if you're going to be a leader, you have to have a mentee. You have to mentor somebody. You have to leave it with somebody else, right? That's a part of leadership. If you're a leader all about yourself, you might get the outcome, but no one's going to follow you. Hmm. So I was very blessed, and I still have a coach and mentor today. I go to Toronto 4 times a year for that, right? So, yeah, even at my age. So these kids look at me as like, I don't need anybody, I can figure it out. It's like, yeah, you can figure it out, but I can compress decades into days and you can. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I know strategies that you don't know. Yeah. I can teach you strategies. Right? And I share strategies when I talk about how to get an outcome in 100 days. Boom, 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 boom. I figured it out but I figured it out because I combined everything that I learned, all the moments, combine them, say, okay, if I want to get an outcome, there is a strategy to get the outcome. And here's the strategy that I've used over and over. And that's how I went back into the Hudson River to swim with Navy SEALs without having swum for over 40 years. I used the same strategy that I've used in business, just applied it to swimming. All I did is apply it to swimming. So if you can apply it from business to swimming, you can apply it anywhere in your relationships, money, right? You can do it anywhere part of your life. So I just wish the younger generations would understand the best thing they can do is invest in themselves and find a mentor. If they can do those 2 things, they will exponentially accelerate not only their careers, but have a fulfilling life, what I call a limitless life. Hmm.
That's very true. There's so many business owners I meet that don't think they need a mentor. They don't think they need someone to show them what to do, that they can do it themselves, they can figure it out themselves. And maybe they can, but it'll take them a hell of a lot longer to do that. And I think the other angle as well, that whether you think you have a mentor or you don't, you do. It's just not necessarily a good mentor. You've always got someone that you follow, someone that influences you. So who's your mentor now? Who are you actually working with at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. His name's Don Barden, and I got another one, Fred Erler. That's the 2 people, and they're both in Atlanta. And they both came into my life probably about 10 years ago now. But what you just said is very true, because in my book, what I realized as I was writing this book, From Turmoil to Triumph, I wrote every word. I'm writing this thing from the lessons I learned and all this. What I realized, and what I did in my book, I went back and then rewrote it, because I realized is my mom and dad were teaching me the same things throughout my life, and I wasn't listening to nothing, because your mom and dad are too close to you, right? they're too close. You need somebody from the outside. I think you can learn from them, of course, but if you have someone from the outside giving you these insights, right? You're like, wow. You know, I think my mom told me that when I was 12 years old. Really? I didn't think she's that smart, right?
Yeah, the worst thing is when you go back to your parents and say, hey, guess what I've just learned? I learned this. I've been telling you that for 10 years.
You're an idiot. I told you this, right?
Yeah.
I showed you how to do it. I told you. I just can't do it for you. You have to, sometimes you need somebody else. And that's why you need a mentor that you can bounce things off of. And see, Don is my mentor. Fred is my coach. And I've got another coach, a business coach in Toronto. So I've got people, and I pay these people. Because if you invest in it, you're going to take action on it.
Yeah.
A lot of people want free knowledge, right? And there's some things out there you can get anything you really want, but if you pay for it, you got value into it. And the other part of it, which I actually had my coach call yesterday with Fred, is he holds me accountable. How many people in life will hold you accountable? Right? Not too many people hold you accountable.
No.
In business, they'll just fire you. You're not doing it. I can find somebody else, right? When you're an entrepreneur like I am now, you know, I've got to make the calls. I've got payroll. I've got payables. I've got to serve my clients. Whole different mindset, right? And it all comes down to culture and mission. That's why one of the things I learned from Tony, right? He has a unique culture and he has a mission. So why reinvent the wheel? It's already proven. Just do it, replicate it. You know, rinse and repeat, as they say. Just replicate it. And that's all I keep doing is just replicating it. Because if it worked, now, yes, we might be able to modify it to improve on it, but there's strategies. And one thing about life is if you understand the strategy of anything, you can get your outcome. Most people don't want to invest to find the strategy, though. They want you, tell me what to do. Well, you know, I had to spend money and time and experience, right? Blood, sweat, tears, you know, and that's how I learned it, right? You know, the strategy on how to do something. You know, I can give my kids strategies, but it's like, you know, I don't know about your mother and father, but my mom and dad always said, go to the library if you want to find it out, right? We had libraries and books back in the 60s. Nowadays, you go on the internet. It's much easier, right? It's like, you know, how do you spell this word, Mom? Go figure it out yourself, right? Because when you figure it out yourself, you remember it, right?
Yeah.
But there are people like me and other people out there that can have done it now because we've all have some proven track records. And the difference between me and somebody maybe in their 30s is they're smarter. They're probably smarter than I am, book-wise. They're probably smarter. I tell people this all the time. Millennials and Gen Zers are much smarter than my generation, baby boomers. But what don't they have? They don't have wisdom. And what's wisdom? The ability to apply knowledge effectively. They don't have it. They don't know how to apply it. They got it. What do I do with it? Well, people like me at our age, right, have actually learned it and applied it. That's the wisdom that they don't have. And you can impart on people.
It's the application, as you say, because people want instant results. They want instant success. They want the dopamine hit of knowing how to do something. But if you don't actually apply what you've learned and apply the knowledge, it's not going to work. And if you've got a mentor that's keeping you accountable, that's going to help that. You're talking about the difference between knowledge and wisdom there. Something funny I've heard a long time ago, I always remember, is that knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
That's right. Yep. That's a great analogy. That's a tremendous analogy.
Thank you. I'm pleased with that one.
I think whoever came up with that, that's a good distinction because you're right. It's exactly right. It's the distinctions, right? And that's the difference between a lot of people is the people who are taking massive action and getting outcomes. Understand distinctions. There's little things. There's everybody knows the big things, right? You do this and you'll get this, but it's those little things that come around. It's like, well, if I did it this and applied it this way, I may get a different outcome. Yeah, and a perfect example is Steve Jobs. I use this example all the time in my talks. Is, you know, why did Steve Jobs invent the iPod and then the iPhone? Why did he do it? The reason he did it, and I read this and I'm like, I was like blown away, right? Because I grew up in his generation in the 60s and 70s. He was 10 years older than I was, right? He said, I went to we used to, back in the 60s and 70s, we had these called albums, where you, big round things, you put them on a record player, they play music, right? We had these things. He said, every time you go to get an album, all you want is one song. I said, I'm sitting there going, I'm the same way. I go to the record store because I heard a song I liked. I buy a whole album to get that one song. Because why do you have to do that? Why can't I just sell a song and give them a device that they can play it on? iPod. Oh, by the way, if I combine a phone with it, what could I do? Oh my God. And he's a multi-billion-dollar company because he was frustrated because he couldn't get one song off an album individually. Elon Musk, same way, right? He's taking people to space. He's got an electric car, right? Now he bought Twitter because he got frustrated, right? He got frustrated. Why can't people go up in space? Well, I'll figure it out. Why do I have to be relying on fossil fuel? I'll figure it out, right? Why, Twitter became very regulated with people saying, stopping conversations. Why can't we have an open conversation? So these kind of people, right? All they do is the strategies on how to do it. They see the issue. And I actually had lunch with a gentleman who wrote a book. It's called, just adding a zero. His name's Chad Jenkins. And he talks about what he does. His art is identifying friction in companies. What's the friction, right? What's rubbing it? If I can help them stop rubbing that, I have not only added significant value, but I can make a lot of money. So he's teaching me on how can I identify friction in people's lives. He's doing it with companies. I'm doing it with people's lives.
That's interesting because I've recently come across the friction within the sales process. That if you come up to an objection with a sale, if you try and push against that objection, you're pushing a pendulum the wrong way. You need to make it flow with you to avoid the friction, which will help the sale. So I presume it's a similar principle.
It's a very similar principle. Very similar principle. And so many companies and individuals all have friction. Because, one of the things in life is, you take our life as a circle and you divide it like a pie. So you have your relationships, you got your money, you got your spiritual, you got your business, right? You got your physical health, all these little pieces of the pie. And in most people's lives, that thing is not circular. There's always like indentures because, you know what? My finances suck, but I have a pretty good relationship. Or I'm going through a divorce, but I got more money than I know what to do with. Or I'm fat, right? I'm overweight, right? I'm out of shape, but I'm making a lot of money. So the goal is to have everything, right, is symmetrical, but that's not realistic for people. So where's the friction? Where's the friction in that? So that's what I'm now, that's my next sort of venture is working on how to do that, help people identify that friction. Let's undo that friction. So, and one of the areas I'm starting off with is primarily your health, because if you don't have your health, nothing else matters. That's why I went back and swam, and I'm showing people how to do it. Because now I have a role, I can be a role. So, you know what? I'm 63 years old. You don't have to be, 28, and you can do it any age, right?
And is that a talk that you've got on even in that out? Is that a talk, or is that a book, or is that a program that you're doing?
That is part of my program that I talk, and part of my, I should say, workshop. Okay, and it's probably going to be a part of my next book that's coming out in 2026. So yeah, it's and I just believe there's strategies for everything, and what I try to do is be a strategist, trying to find out, okay, who's got the strategy that I need, and that strategy is called finding your who's for your hows. And I learned that from my coach in Toronto. He's the one who came. I didn't come up with it. Right. But it's like all of a sudden he opened my mind up on two concepts. First was you got to find your who's for your hows, because you're not good at everything. And because I suck at accounts receivable, right? And payroll. I'm not good at that. That's not my bailiwick. I'm good at other things. So I had to find somebody who I could figure out just to take that off my plate. The other thing is it's called the gap and the gain. And the gap and the gain means so many people live in the gap. And what does that mean? They live in the future where it's like, I haven't accomplished this yet. I'm a failure. Instead of living in the gain, I'm like, look how far progress I've come. And if people can just focus on living on progress instead of living on, I haven't got there yet, They live in the gain, and all of a sudden they got momentum, and momentum starts building, right? And that's what I'm working with a lot of youth about, because a lot of youth are living in the gap because they see TikTok and all this, and these people are making millions of dollars on TikTok, and why can't I do this? And right, instead of saying, you know what, I've got an education, I've got a job, I'm making some money, right? And you said it a moment ago, Darren. A lot of people want instant gratification.
Yeah.
And it's really about delayed gratification. That's where the real wealth comes from.
And in terms of this program you talked about, is this something that people can do online, or is this a face-to-face one in the US?
I do it both. And in fact, I have it in my online course, which we're refreshing right now. Okay. And yeah, because we figured out that we already had this content. It's just a little bit dated in the presentation. So we're updating the presentation. It'll be back online at DaveSandersonSpeaks.com, hopefully by the end of the year. We're refreshing it right now. But yeah, and I teach it in my workshops. When I do my business workshops, this is what I talk about, right? All these different concepts, because something's going on with the company, right? There's a reason. A leadership void, they have friction within their people, something's going on, right? Or I wouldn't be there. They could hear my story by going and hear me talk.
And what kind of people are you looking for the workshops? Are these solo entrepreneurs? Are they startups, or are they large corporations, management?
Oh, I have two different types. I do have the business workshops where I go into an organization, a sales organization, and do that. But for what I usually do is where I have most of the people I get engaged with are either salespeople, because I was in 37 years in sales. I was a top producer. I sort of figured it out after a number of years, and then applied a lot of this. And then solo entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, because they got small companies, just like I do, right? And I have not 10x my business yet. We're working towards it, right? But we've got the strategy on how to do it, and we're making major progress. So that's when people want me to work with them, either privately or more group. That's where we focus on that. And when someone calls me in on workshops, usually like a sales organization primarily, because I was in sales and I can get to the sales pretty quick, because I've been there, done that, and I can talk about the real AI. And because all I hear about is AI these days, right? AI this, AI that, Apple Intelligence, Gemini, all this stuff, right? I said, yeah, but in sales, there's a real AI, and people look at me like, what are you talking about? It's like authentic interactions. That's what sales comes down to. It's building that authentic interaction. So at 2:00 in the morning, your client knows they can call you and you will fix their problem. It's you, right? You have that authentic interaction. And that's how I always became a top producer, is I built those authentic interactions throughout a company. So I talk about the real AI. Yeah, artificial intelligence is important. I'm not discounting it. You have to understand the basics of it. You have to. But if you really want to get your outcomes in sales, it's really about building the AI, really authentic interactions. And how do you do that? And I share a strategy on how to do that. That's how I always became a top producer in the companies I've served. I focused on that. And a lot of times my companies, Darren, did not like me doing that. They'd rather me follow the game plan, right? And you know what? The game plans of the 70s and 80s, the 90s, they don't work these days. People can go online and get your service if they want it, right? They don't need you.
Thinking about what you said then as well, it's bringing it back full circle. Because obviously Elon's got the self-driving cars now. They're not legal to be self-driving in the UK yet, but it may happen. Eventually, we're going to get self-driving everything. We're going to get self-driving planes at some point. If that plane you were on had been piloted by AI, chances are it would have turned around and tried to make it back to the airport.
That's right. Exactly right. That's why the human touch, as he talked about, it was the human interaction that turned that thing from a tragedy to a miracle, right? And that's why, right now they're conducting some more stuff with drones and things. I think that's effective in some ways. I truly believe that. But it always comes back down to, like General Schwarzkopf said, and I heard him speak, and I actually had the opportunity to be with him, it always comes down to the ground troops, man. You always got to go in, right? You can send the drones in and knock some things out, and that's good. But it always comes down to you got to dig it out. And that's what's going on in Gaza now, right? They're trying to dig it out, right? And it's causing a lot of lives. So, yeah, but you're exactly right. If AI was the way they were running the airlines back in 2009, We would probably end up in the bay right there, right next to the airport, because the plane probably wouldn't have made it back, because it proved it would run probably about 100, 200 feet short.
Yeah.
Right, minimum. And you're in the water, and you're at 100 and 200 miles an hour instead of 120 like we hit.
Yeah. On that sobering bombshell, we're about out of time. I could talk to you all day, but we can't, unfortunately. So as a final point, you've talked a little bit about your program. You've talked a little bit about your workshops that you do. Anyone listening to this thinking, I need to find out more about Dave Sanderson, I need to get in touch with him or get him into my company, what are the best ways people can get in touch with you?
Well, thank you. First, I would encourage you to go to LinkedIn under me, Dave Sanderson, because every Monday I put out new content. I write a blog every Monday and I share my new content. So that's the best way to get interaction. Or my website, DaveSandersonSpeaks.com. You can get a hold of me there, and you can see my content, some of the videos, and we're always expanding. It's always under construction, but I'd be honored if anybody reached out. My books are there. I publish my magazine called Moments Matter, where I highlight and feature 5 to 6 people from around the world every quarter, and let them tell their Moments Matter story, because everybody's got a story. All I do in this magazine is give these people a shot to say, you know what, this is the moment that triggered me to be able to do what I'm going to do. And so people can see patterns, right? If you read my magazine, what you'll find out over the next few months is these people have done it a certain way. There's a pattern to be able to get your outcome. That's right. That's why I do my magazine, Moments Matter. And they can get a free digital copy, or we'll get a printed copy out here shortly. We're still working on how the process to do that, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. I've absolutely loved speaking to you. You are an inspiration and a living legend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren.